Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the mental health and personality factors that may be at work in the Stephen McDaniel murder case. McDaniel was convicted in the murder of Lauren Giddings that occurred in 2011. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. So first I'll take a look at the timeline in this case, then look at the mental health and personality factors. So starting with the timeline, in 2011, we see 25-year-old Stephen McDaniel and 27-year-old Lauren Giddings are law students. They both lived in the Barrister Hall apartment complex in Macon, Georgia. In mid-May of 2011, they both graduated from Mercer University Law School. Lauren was studying for the bar exam. I presume Stephen should have been doing the same thing. At some point, not long after they met, Stephen developed an interest in Lauren. He asked her out, but she said no because she was already dating somebody, another attorney, 20 years her senior. This rejection did not decrease Stephen's level of interest. About 2 months before the murder, he searched for pictures of Lauren on the internet and looked up her post on social media, including LinkedIn and Facebook. He specifically searched this phrase, "choked unconscious, how long wake up," suggesting he wanted to render her unconscious and then commit an assault. He searched for the term escape prison. I guess he wanted a backup plan there. It amazes me that an attorney would believe that escaping from prison is actually a route worth exploring. One would think not getting caught would be the priority. He took pictures of her and recorded her coming and going from her apartment. Lauren had suspected that somebody had broken into her apartment, but evidently did not know it was Stephen. This takes us to June 25, 2011. Stephen once again searches Lauren's Facebook page, and he fastens a recording device to a pole so he can record her apartment through her window. June 26, 2011, 4:30 a.m., so just hours after those other events with the Facebook page and the recording. Stephen made entry into Lauren's apartment using a master key he had stolen. He was wearing a mask and gloves. She was sleeping but heard Stephen approach after a floorboard creaked. She told him to get out. He jumped on the bed and started strangling her. At one point, she ripped off his mask and said, "Stephen, please stop." By the time Stephen killed her, they were both on the floor. He put her body in the bathtub and went back to his apartment. He would return to her apartment that night and cut her body into 5 pieces, disposing all of the pieces except for the torso in a dumpster behind a building on the law school's campus. He put the torso in a trash can outside the apartment complex, hoping that all the pieces would be taken to the landfill. He also flushed evidence down her toilet, including parts of her fingers. Lauren was supposed to move from her apartment within a few days because her lease was expiring in a week. She planned to stay at a friend's residence until she could find a job and a permanent place to live. Her boyfriend was in California, and her dog was with her parents. A few days later, Lauren's friends came looking for her. McDaniel offered to join them, perhaps to look helpful or to explain why his DNA might be discovered in that apartment. The friends gained entrance to the apartment using a key that Lauren had hidden in a candle jar on the balcony. They found Lauren's purse, her school ID, her wallet, and her keys. Her 2004 Mitsubishi Galant was parked outside. The police were notified, and they started investigating. Now moving to June 30. Stephen searches how to erase a browsing history. He went out with Lauren's friends as they searched for Lauren, and he did 2 interviews with the media. During the first interview, he told a reporter how he went into the apartment and there was no sign of Lauren. One of the reporters asked him about a body that had been recovered. We see his affect changes completely. He indicated that he needed to sit down. Then he comes back to the reporters and resumes talking. They didn't ask him to talk the second time. He appears distressed, and he was kind of pushing the story that Lauren must have been running and somebody took her. He said he didn't know why anyone would want to hurt her. He asked why anyone would do this. He was crying. He seemed exacerbated. He said that Lauren revealed that someone had tried to break into her apartment on a prior occasion. He said that he wished he had lent Lauren a handgun, and he specifically mentioned there was no sign of a struggle in the apartment, trying to promote this theory of the crime that doesn't point toward him. Stephen had scratch marks on his stomach and on his face. He claimed they were self-inflicted while he slept. He gave police consent to search his apartment. Evidently, when they were searching his apartment, he was sweating profusely, and he drank at least 10 bottles of water. During that search, they found the master key to the apartment. They found a pair of the victim's underwear. They found blog posts describing violence toward women. They found 3 firearms, many swords, a package for a hacksaw. They found a flash drive with hundreds of Lauren's personal photos and videos taken inside and outside her apartment. The flash drive also had other disturbing images unrelated to this case. They also found condoms. He had told the police he was a virgin, so they pressed him as to why he would have those, and he said he had stolen them from other apartments, so he confessed to burglaries. The hacksaw package they found matched up to one they located in a locked closet in the laundry room of the apartment complex. It was later tested. Lauren's blood was on it. A sheet with blood on it was found in that same laundry room. That same day, June 30, we see that Stephen McDaniel is taken to the police station and interviewed. His demeanor changed quite a bit during that interview. He was subdued, relaxed. He had limited speech production, mostly just saying yes, no, and I don't know. He was distant and disengaged. He was aggressively interviewed by 2 detectives. Much of the time, only one of them was in the room with him. They were using a lot of insults, and they made a number of unsuccessful attempts to get a confession. We see some odd strategies and items they brought up during that interrogation. We see this cookie jar analogy where one of the detectives was trying to get Stephen to admit that he must have taken a cookie from the cookie jar when he was younger. I guess he was trying to show a pattern of criminality, like he stole these cookies and he went on to murder. It's kind of a stretch. We see a number of guilt trips, and we see a lecture about Stephen not cleaning his apartment. They both put their hands on Stephen's shoulder, evidently trying to outdo him in terms of winning the creepiest person in the room award. They claimed that there was blood in Stephen's apartment, when of course there would not have been, right? So police often tell lies in interrogations, but they lost ground with this lie because there's no reason he would have believed there was blood in his apartment. One detective said that he had done bad things too. Now this is a common interrogation strategy. The detective tries to make it seem as though they've had problems as well. So everybody makes mistakes. That might encourage somebody to confess. Well, he wasn't really too good at getting a confession from Stephen, but at least there was one confession in that interrogation room that evening. The detective said, "Why are you acting like this? I can talk in complete sentences." Based on his performance interrogating Stephen, this might have been the upper limit of his communication skills. The detective berated Stephen for not washing his clothes in several weeks, again kind of going to these unusual, small accusations. We see these pressing Stephen, why? He's asking over and over, why did you do it? I'm not sure why they did this. It's really not good form when trying to get a confession. Perhaps they were just aggravated with Stephen. They've had enough, and they thought they could pressure him with that direct strategy. A few times, one of the detectives actually scratches his head to show how easily hair falls out. He was trying to convince Stephen that Stephen's hair must have fallen out in Lauren's apartment. At the end of the interview, one of the detectives said, "I appreciate all your cooperation tonight," which is interesting because, of course, Stephen didn't cooperate at all. This detective may have been trying to fool himself into believing that he had accomplished something that evening. A confession would have been convenient, but the police had enough evidence against Stephen without it. On April 21, 2014, Stephen pled guilty and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. He's eligible for parole in 2041. As part of that agreement, he would not be charged with the burglaries, and he would not be charged in connection with some of the other images found on that flash drive. Now moving to the mental health and personality characteristics. Let's look at a few of the ways that Stephen McDaniel was described by people who were interviewed. He was described as creepy, eccentric, odd, awkward, somewhat isolated, a misfit. People said he spent a lot of time in his apartment with the window shades drawn. He was also described as reliable and hardworking, right? So we see two sides here. Occasionally, students at the law school joked about him being dangerous. Lauren said that if he was dangerous, she would be the only one who was safe because she got along with Stephen. She was always nice to him. Stephen had an obsession with zombies. He had asked a number of people how to commit the perfect murder. He had an intense interest in sexual activity of unusual varieties. He spent a lot of time on the internet searching for information related to that interest. At some point, he became obsessed with Lauren and stalked her, entering her apartment, stealing her pictures, and recording her. I don't think it's a coincidence that he killed her right before she was going to move. It was his last chance to have access to her. Through her preparations to move, she was threatening to destroy the fantasy that Stephen had invested so much energy in over the last few months. Even though he planned the crime, for example, buying the hacksaw and conducting internet searches related to a crime like that, he clearly didn't prepare well. He just made so many mistakes that a lawyer would likely avoid. His computer search history, the flash drive, the package for the hacksaw, admitting to unrelated felonies. He just left so much evidence available, he really made it quite easy for law enforcement. Why didn't he just place all the evidence in the trash? Why did he put the hacksaw and that sheet in the laundry room? What could have happened here is he wanted to leave his options open. He was engaging in this fantasy where he committed this crime, but he was not completely certain that he wanted to go through with it. He prepared somewhat, but did not finish those preparations. What was Stephen doing during the television interview and the police interrogation? What does that tell us about mental health factors? Well, in the interview, it appears as though he's taken by surprise when he hears the information about Lauren's body being discovered. And then after he composes himself, he tries to appear concerned and helpful. His expressions did not look spontaneous. They looked forced. It's almost like he was trying to mimic other people he had seen expressing emotions. He didn't necessarily experience them himself. He had to borrow them from other people. As far as the interrogation, there are a number of possible theories. This just could be how he reacts to stress. It could have been that he wanted the detectives to look foolish. Perhaps he thought he could gain an advantage by consenting to the interview as opposed to asking for an attorney. For example, maybe he thought the police would reveal something to him, or he thought he could bait them into attacking him physically, maybe to gain some sort of advantage in the proceedings. Later on, during one of his appeals, his demeanor was not at all like what we saw in that interrogation, which leads me to believe he was doing that deliberately. That was some sort of strategy. There are so many odd things about this case. Even though Stephen was a bit unusual, his escalation to murder is quite surprising. The motive was probably sexual domination, but he also could have done it in part to deny anyone else access to Lauren. If he couldn't have her, nobody would have her. Now, looking at his personality, I used the 5-factor model to conceptualize personality. I remember the 5 traits through the acronym OCEAN: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. When looking at his behavior, it seems to align with a high level of openness to experience. He had quite a bit of fantasy going on. He had high conscientiousness. He was usually dependable. He had low extroversion. He generally stayed to himself. Mid to high agreeableness. He was not combative. He was described as easy to get along with. And we see mid-range neuroticism overall. It didn't seem like he was particularly emotionally reactive, although on the day of the murder and during the following days, his emotions do seem to be a bit more unstable, like we see during that interview. His behavior may align with paraphilias and cluster A personality features like schizotypal personality. So we see kind of that odd, eccentric manifestation with unusual beliefs, perhaps even magical thinking, and someone who's socially anxious. We don't really see too much in the way of antisocial or narcissistic personality features. That's a bit unusual. In a case like this, we would expect to see quite a few characteristics from each of those categories. This is one of those strange cases that reminds us that some people live a life outside of observation, and they build toward an act that no one would expect. Those are my thoughts on the Stephen McDaniel case. If you found this content enjoyable, please subscribe to my channel and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.